Welcome to the world of Jalara, where the people of Genesis Battle of Champions live. Our in-store gameplay community is growing. Visit GenesisBattleOfChampions.com to find a local game store near you. Our list of international distribution partners continues to grow. Ask your local game store to contact one of these fine companies and have your store join our Play network. Visit GenesisBattleOfChampions.com to explore the lore of the lands. There are chapters of lore that you can read, chapters of lore that you can watch, and there's also a helpful map where you can learn where all of the key characters in the next set live inside the world of Jalara.
ding dong, they just think they are. Another little wannabe gangster trying to play hard. Ding dong, they just think they are. Another little wannabe gangster trying to play hard. Free up the guys, then dip out the ends. Jump in the ride, then burn out the rims. Don't stop, don't catch the boy that I'm in. Now we on the block with the up for events. Skin kept close, cause you plotting on them with the tits on 10. Batch in the back that's on tap, all ready to go and jump in. Ding down, they just think they are. Another little wannabe gangster trying to play hard.
Tell me why I always need to survive off your love, your love. 'Cause every time you fire at me, it kills all the fun, kills all the fun. Every blink of an eye is a new drop of blood from the sky, from the sky. But I don't mind, 'cause the way that you lie makes me feel so alive, feel so alive. 'Cause the rhythm awaits, waiting for my bones to break.
Hey everyone, it's me, Jason, and I'm being once again joined by my good friend Will, and we are here live, and I
Oh,
hope you can hear me. Hey Will, how are you doing?
good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited for another night of getting to dive deep into your brain there to hear your thoughts on some Genesis design. I think it's going to be fun.
I don't know if we're scaring people away or they're coming to watch the dumpster truck on fire. I don't know.
Uh, I couldn't guess. Maybe a little column A, a little column B.
Those-
Who's to say, right?
right, right. Who's to say? Nice.
I'm just distracted for a second because, as you know, I have to keep track of the list of names. So some people have already said hello in the chat tonight. Hi, everybody. I'm glad you could all make it out once again. I'm just adding names onto the wheel because somebody's going to win a prize later tonight for just saying hello in the chat. That's all you got to do is let us know that you're here and you're watching, and you're in with a chance to win. I've got a whole bunch of graphics loaded up and ready to go for a bunch of champions because tonight I believe the plan is we're going to talk a little bit about Axon, the blue color, one of my favorites, and how it meshes with Thymos. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about Axon and Phage as well. I loaded those up. So red and blue, and then green and blue. We'll talk a bit about the history of or the evolution, I guess I should say, of
Yeah.
how the champions were designed in the past. Some of that's going to be parts where you may have been involved, and other parts might have predated your involvement. Although with these color combinations in particular, it all basically starts right around Origins, so there's not a lot of early era stuff to talk about.
No,
But
no. It's all later end of HCG, and then beginning of Edge of Exile. So
yeah. So one thing that I thought was interesting is because as I mentioned to you in a private chat earlier today, I generally don't play the Earth affiliation, which is Thymos, the red one. So I never actually noticed that there wasn't any blue and red champions for a long time. And I was kind of surprised, just because I was never looking for one to build a deck around. I didn't realize that there wasn't any until Origins. And that kind of surprised me just because in the early days of the game, for the most part, there was only four colors for a long time. Phage didn't come in at all until the release of Origins. And
hmm
I was kind of surprised. It caught me off guard a bit, just that there was so many years with so many sets that came out, and there was never a red blue champion. I'm wondering as a player because like I got involved right around beta was still easily available in stores, but I got involved just as the pandemic began, so I actually missed out on a good almost 2 years of in-store play, even though I was a real big fan of the game. Uh,
right.
as a player, back in those days before Origins came out, was there ever a time when you said to yourself, like, my God, why isn't there a red blue champion? Or was that not a color combination you were thinking of yourself as, I want to play this?
Um. So we were all waiting for it. Like so, red, blue, and yellow, purple, or chaos bellum were
Yeah.
both non-existent. Um. So they were both color pairings that were um possible at that time, but there was no champion that represented them. So it was kind of like, when are we going to get these champions? When are they going to get spoiled? Like it's going to like this thing that we were looking towards and we're hoping for. Everyone at that point, early on, really thought like red blue was going to be, you know, broken or very strong, or how can you have all this card draw with all this damage? How's the game going to, how's the game going to handle that? So it was definitely something that players were looking forward to, and like you say, it was a long time. Like so, it didn't come until Origins. So we went Alpha, Beta, J, which are all basically the same, and then Rays before, and then we had a reprint, and then Origins came out. So yeah, as a player, looking forward to it. As a tester, it was interesting. I definitely loved the Bellum Chaos combination when I was testing because I was involved in testing at that point.
You mind if I
I
just
still do.
Do you mind if I just
Yeah.
get you to pause just for a sec? I just want to say hi to some people in the chat here and comment on the chat. We got two Stevens talking back and forth. Stephen Cullup, I'm going to assume, and Stephen Penn. Stephen Penn's a regular who tunes in fairly often. The other Stephen Cullup, I'm not familiar with, but both of you, welcome. Thanks for joining in the chat tonight. It's great to see you both
hmm
here. I just want to address for Stephen Cullip, who's been out of the game for a while, it sounds like, but is a fan, you've picked a great time to kind of tune back in to see what's going on, because I think over the next few weeks to a month, there's going to be some really exciting news coming out. And in the meantime, some updates you might have missed is that we now have two different distributors in the States. We have one nationwide in Canada. We have a distributor over in Europe. So we've got distribution partners making it easier than ever for game stores to carry our product. Especially in the States, it's much easier than ever before because we have Southern Hobby Distribution, one of the biggest in the States. And then we also have a smaller, more independent one with more flexibility and a wider selection of products, being Indie Pro Games out of Seattle. So we've seen lots of exciting movement and growth in the time since this new company, Edge of Exile, took over. As you can tell, looking on the screen here, Will is officially one of the staff here. He's one of the team, one of the people doing all the amazing work behind the scenes to make the game stay vibrant and help it to keep growing. So I just wanted to say thanks for tuning in. Oh, hey, Scott Slemino, welcome to the chat tonight from the Boulder area. Boulder, stupid question, but being Canadian, Boulder, Colorado? I'm sorry.
believe so, yeah.
It is Colorado, right? I'm not just confused because of the Rockies. So, yeah, well, that's very cool. There's definitely a pocket of people out in the Colorado area that love the game, and we're trying to get back into some of the stores out that way. So, I think with the fact that we have the much bigger distribution partners and reach in the States now is going to make it a lot easier.
Hmm.
Invasion, the first set that came out under the Edge of Exile banner back in December, has a whole new look to the cards. You'll see some of those cards actually on the screen tonight as we discuss some of the modern era champions versus some of the historical era ones from the previous company. And the feedback's been really positive overall. I'd say very positive. Everybody reacted really well to the small templating changes and visual changes, and it's an exciting time. We got lots of really good momentum going on right now, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Same for Scott. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. It's great to see the chat kicking off with some fresh names as well as some regulars. And with that, I will stop prattling on and allow Will to please carry on, resume your train of
Continue on.
thought. Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to
Um,
neglect people. If people comment,
yeah, for sure.
I want them to know that we're watching the chat and we're actively paying attention to them.
Nice. Let's dive in, I guess. So going to Origins is where our first color pairings show up. Um, the Kareen and Kato, I guess, were the only two in this color pairings we're discussing tonight that were sort of showed up. Oh,
Would
I
you
guess
like me?
there's Alta.
So I'll start with Kareen and Kato as the first two up on the screen.
Well, which order do you have them in?
Well,
Make it
I
simpler.
had I actually did have those two first because I thought they were two of the
Yeah,
oldest
perfect.
ones. So if that's what you'd like to talk with, then ta-da! There they are on the screen.
Nice. So yeah, so this was the color pairing that I think was most sought after at that point. So these were the first two champions in this color pairing to come out, and it was interesting because so I was involved in testing behind the scenes and working with the Haunted Castle Gaming team and the Future League and all that. So tested all of these champions. So this was the first time we sort of had champions that were kind of code named, and we didn't really know exactly what they were going to do altogether, but we sort of tested out different parts of them. And so I remember
Was that for secrecy reasons, or like what were
it
the
was a bit of
reasons?
secrecy, a bit of like not wanting, because there were some complaints that like Future League people who participate in Future League had an advantage, or people in Future League had, it was kind of the set was sort of spoiled before it came out. So kind of to sort of help people be part of Future League without having, the box opening experience ruined, or just a bunch of different things. So
So you could compare that to what it's like nowadays because you're on the play testing team and the development team and all that. And with our play testing, once we've got cards kind of formed and we want to test them, players get to like the players in our playtest group get to play with them as is with nothing really held back. Is it a like how does that experience compare trying to work with a card when you're not exactly sure what the final form is versus the way we've been
there,
doing it?
yeah, there's less confusion, but it's also a smaller team, right? So I can understand, like Future League was an open system where you could kind of come in, and if you wanted, you could have everything spoiled and not really participate in the testing. Whereas now we have a dedicated testing team, of people coming in and testing these cards out and putting them through like specific tests, and we're giving them tasks. They're coming back and saying they're trying to break everything. So it really doesn't help us along to try to withhold information when it's better that our testers have all the information so that they can put out the best sort of tests to make sure that the cards are functional, they're doing what we want, and they're powerful, but they're not broken, right? Not everything has to be super powerful, not everything has to be super vanilla. So it's kind of trying to find that happy medium for some things. Now, some things will be more powerful because we're trying to push. Maybe we need to have an answer to something, or we need to have a push towards a certain type of archetype or whatever, right? But for the most part, I think I like our system. We might have a few less opinions, but we have much more dedicated testing results. So,
awesome.
So with all that said,
I'm sorry. I was just curious when these two cards kind of took their final form. I was wondering, was either one of these one you were involved in the design process with, or more just play testing?
No, just the play testing at this point. These ones, so Kato was nerfed right at the end because there's a big push because basically the nerf there was just the costing of the Force Warp was a lot cheaper, and it was just like you were able to do it a lot more efficiently, and that was just becoming very powerful. And Kato is still to this day probably one of the most powerful champions, right? Like if you want to think of traditional
after the nerf, you're saying?
Yeah, even afterwards. So it could have been nerfed further, but this one, if you think of like traditional archetypes in card games, like this is like a control player's champion, right? Because you have freedom of control of where things are going to be placed, where things are going to be, attacking, defending, whatever. So.
Shout out to Cardboard Cohorts. Got to get those gains working out at the gym and listening in while he's working. You can do it. Roll. Be powerful. Please, Will.
Yeah, so Kato was fantastic as far as like for control players. It kind of leaned into what the control was going to be. And then I was heavily against Kareen in testing, but then it was sort of like it was a thematic lore piece that had to sort of work, right? So it's kind of like the lore was kind of, we needed to have this champion, so do this. And so there's a few iterations of Kareen as well that happened, but in the end, Kareen, I think, is very powerful. Kareen's a nightmare for design because it's basically like an electrified fence that you can't get too close to because you have to always like be careful. It's like, well, is Kareen going to break this card, or is Kareen going to break that card, right? And Kareen actually broke a few cards in Origins itself that had to get sort of reworked before the set could come out. I remember that too. So it's interesting though. Like,
would you have preferred Kareen to be changed versus the cards, like versus the cards? I mean,
well, that's the thing. Like, it's kind of hard. Like, this leans into like a champion that has a very particular backstory, a very particular play style, or their lore or who they are as a champion really sort of defines how they function in the game, which I think is really cool. That's definitely something that I really like. I really like champions that, or I try to push champions to be, their play style or how they function or what they do in the game is similar to who they are in the story or whatever, right?
Jeremy's wondering in the chat if you happen to remember offhand any of the cards that were a little broken and had to be adjusted due to Kareen.
So the big one was Gargantuan Rabbit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Gargantuan Rabbit has the fatigue trigger.
Yeah.
So I remember building a deck and testing that the fatigue was 7 on Gargantuan Rabbit, and it didn't say Gargantuan Rabbit's Earth attack in the trigger. It just said when Gargantuan Rabbit deals damage. So because Kareen becomes Gargantuan Rabbit, you could do any amount of damage, and every time you did damage, it would fatigue 6 off the top. So
That's how that
you
worked. According to the rules, was Kareen kind of assumed all the traits, not just the.
yeah,
I
so
thought it was
Korean
just
takes
the
everything.
awareness. Oh,
So
okay.
Korean takes everything from a summon, all abilities, including the awareness, and then you can change your awareness by switching into a different spell, right? So
Right.
the play pattern was Gargantuan Rabbit, Gargantuan Rabbit. So you stack the trigger twice, and then Tsunami, and then you would just fling damage at them from called shots or um, whatever damage you had left, and you would basically mill 14 cards each time you hit them, and
Wow.
they kind of just burn them out. So
I can see why that's
so
a problem.
so we had to change that, and then there was another card. I can't remember what it was. I think it was. There's another one that has a trigger on. I think it might have been the Naja Cobra, but it's a catch. Anyways, there was another one that we had to adjust to just in case of Kareen going off as far as a combo player, right?
So
Um,
I'm curious because back at that point, as you said, you were part of the Future League, but you weren't part of the actual company per se, and there was a lot of people involved in Future League. So at that point, when you're still really, for the most part, kind of, and don't take this the wrong way, but just a player, not directly involved with the company. As a player, was it always disappointing when a card would get nerfed? Because I know, generally speaking, players tend to love crazy combos and going infinite, and oh my god, this is so overpowered. I was just wondering what your mindset was when you're on the Future League in the first era. Like, was it ever a feel bad when a card would get nerfed, or were you like, no, this is good for the game, so I'm happy with it?
yeah. So I would. So my mindset was always what's better for the game. It's not about like, oh, really like this card, right? Or this card is, so strong I don't want it to be touched. It was all about what's really better for the game. Like how can this card be changed so it still feels strong, but it could be, adjusted on cost or adjusted on damage or whatever that is, right? So, nerfing cards and testing was the whole point. So it's kind of like if you didn't functionally fix a few things, then it would have come out and then would have been a bigger issue. So, in my
Well,
mind,
very cool. Sorry, Damien. I'll try to make sure I enunciate a little clearer and speak a little louder for you. I always have this trouble where my mic seems to cap out, whereas my guests are just so charismatic they overtake the audio. So I'll try and talk a little bit louder. Jeremy says he hates overpowered cards. It limits the play style. That's generally how
yeah.
I feel too. But I was just kind of wondering because some people just love crazy combos and abusing cards
Well,
to.
yeah, and in other card games, I think it's fun to try to put those combos together. In Genesis, it just feels bad, right? Because you have all your resources up front, so the combos can go off, and you can still survive afterwards, or you still have resources even after your combo's done, or whatever the case may be. So, um, combo always feels, really, really strong in Genesis. It's why we actively work against it to make sure there is no combo play.
Somebody talked about overpowered cards, and Janice is in the chat saying, "Stupid Perry." I find that funny. Perry does feel a little overpowered. Not that it really ties into this conversation at all, but I guess there's probably a lot of players
Yeah,
who have
Perry's
at
push.
least. I'm sure there's a lot of Genesis players and players in other games who there's at least one card that drives them crazy all the time. I know in my Magic playing days there were always a few cards that when people would play them, it drove me insane. So, especially if it's something that's in a meta deck and you wind up playing it 8 times in a tournament,
Yeah.
sometimes if a card's too overpowered, it just makes everybody else have to deal with it. So we definitely appreciate the work that the Future League team in the past did, and the development team now is doing to make sure that we don't have any crazy overpowered cards that are taking the fun out of the format. So
Mhm.
appreciate that.
Um, the interesting part here with these two, and all of the red blue until I think the last one, but the first couple red blue champions that came out, they all were very similar stat wise, which was a first. Normally, we would have very different, very like a variation of stats in the same color, but here it was interesting that red blue always kind of stuck very close, right? 20 between 19 and 21, because when we get to Legaia is 19. And then you're like 115 to 135, and you're, you know, 0 to 2 energy. And it seemed like maybe that was a conscious choice. At least I believe it was a conscious choice, just to kind of keep everything the same, so you didn't have any sort of really powerful this way or really powerful that way. But
Well,
I
you were saying
do,
it was a concern, right, of all the card draw in blue and then all the damage in red. I would imagine that had to be at least part of the consideration, right? Is
yeah, that was the concern. But I think in the end, at least what I've experienced, what I've learned is that just providing more answers and diversifying the actual card pool allows people to sort of figure out which cards counter which cards, and you can kind of have, people are discovering those meta decks and discovering what I need to have and include, right? And unfortunately in Origins, because Alpha Beta was so limited, J came out, J2 came out, those are all sort of the same card pool. um,
Mhm.
you had most of your decks were very much sort of very consistently high numbers on certain cards. Bolt shots, tsunamis, chrono walkers. But then with Origins, we got a whole bunch of new cards. Some of them were fantastic, so we finally started seeing some of those numbers sort of sneak down a little bit. And I think, at least from my perspective, that the more we can do that, the more we'll have people naturally flow away from 12 or 15 copies of a card down to maybe 6 to 8 copies of a card, or 4 to 6 copies of a card. And that will naturally happen with the amount of cards that we will hopefully get, powerful enough that people want to play. So
Am I crazy or like it felt to me because I was just like a game store owner and a player and a fan. It felt to me like when Origins came out, that really was a really good high point in organized play and in the health of the game. I think part of it's what you were just saying that there was more variety with the cards, more answers. People didn't need to load up on 12 copies of the same card. But just for
mm-hmm.
me as a player, I really felt like when Origins came out versus what would have been right before that, Jalara second edition, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
Raise and Jar section. Yeah.
I really felt like when Origins came out, it was like, oh God, this game's gonna. And I know this is the irony of me saying this, but I felt like, oh, this game's gonna really go somewhere. Like this is it. They're clicking on all cylinders now, and like this set. And it was also they introduced the fifth color finally, phage, and I'm very much I'm in shallow points. I'm a fan of the color green. I love electrical based damage and the electrical theme, so it just worked out that like that that new affiliation really spoke to me. The set felt more diverse because there's five
Yeah.
affiliations in it. There were some really great cards like Inferno Crawler. Uh, so many great cards that came out in
There's a
that
lot.
set. Like
Yeah.
so many great cards. And I was just like, this game, like it has the chops. Like this, look at what they're doing, right? And I was so excited and couldn't wait for the next set to come out. And ironically, it wound up being we brought it out, but like I just thought Origins really was a huge step, leaps above what the previous sets had brought to the table as a player. Did you feel
Yeah.
that way
Yeah.
too?
Oh, for sure. And I think that's a testament to some of the changes that happened on the HCG team. Like Alex had come in, and you can definitely see his influence. The Future League team had kind of really established a couple of key members that were sort of pushing out a lot of good testing data, all of those things. And there was some time to test Origins. Origins had a lot more time because of that J2 reprint. It really was distilled down to like what was really a really good set. And as far as like for tonight's conversation, all the champions, you know, even though Tashir is only two different versions of an attack, still felt unique and still felt like there was lore behind them. There's a reason that the text is on those cards. The text and the card makes sense and sort of what they're doing. And we really started to see this push, sort of distancing itself from just 2 damage, or distancing itself from just having an attack or some static ability. But yeah, because a lot of these champions are fantastic. They're great.
Yeah. And obviously, in the case of Kyrian and Kato, filling in much needed color combinations that
Color
hadn't
combination,
players
yeah.
hadn't been able to play with before. Um,
So Kato's really strong, and Kreen can be broken at any time. So it's one of those, you know. You always have to watch out for those. But which one do you have next? Do you have Alta next by chance, or
I
do
I
you?
sure do. Yeah. Let me just
Nice.
take these ones down. Take off Kirin, take off Kato. Okay, give me just a second here. You know what? I don't have Alta next.
Okay,
I
what's next?
how about can we do Legaia?
Sure.
Uh so we got Legaia coming up, that's red blue. And then we can bring up Oni as well, who's also red blue. And if we want to get old Oni on the screen, we can make that happen as well.
Sure.
Just to stick with talking about the same color combinations for a moment. So I've got Legaia and I've got Oni Agent of Change on the screen now. And I've got old Oni that was monocolor, red,
Hmm.
waiting in the background should we need them.
Yeah, so here you can see again Legaia, that's almost the same stats. So Legaia lost the energy reduction and lost some health and has 130 aura. So between Kareen, Legaia, and Kato, it's really comes down to a specific ability you're looking for in this color pairing and not necessarily the stats, right? So
Right,
before, in some colors it'd be, oh, I really need X amount of health or I really need X amount of aura, right?
right,
Um, and then you would go, well, if I'm like last week, if I wanted to play yellow red and I need a lot of ore, then I have to be Erica,
right.
right? Or if I want a lot of health, then I need to be long. So whereas these ones, it kind of started blending more, and it was less about the stats and it was more about what ability you wanted to build around. And I think that's sort of where where at least my perspective grew from. Okay, we can have stats can make a champion. We can also have the abilities that make a champion. And if you put them together, you can have stats, abilities, and sort of this, background, lore, flavor, whatever you want to call that. And you can make a champion very, very unique because it's the one card you pick and you always have in the arena. It's always there. So why would you choose to have something sort of vanilla when you could choose to have something maybe it's a little more complex, maybe it's a little more um, exciting, maybe it's a little more thematic, whatever that is you're trying to do. So um, Legaia definitely got nerfed a lot in testing
Right.
because that value of the health there changed a lot. But I really like the idea of sort of a champion that presents more health. That's a very common um, card game trait. But at that point, it was still sort of like if you give our summons too much health, will the summons just run away with the game, and how do we kill them? And so
Right.
there's this weird tension between, well, if you give a summon too much health, it requires two cards instead of one card, and then your summons get so strong, and then so there was definitely some nerfing as far as the actual ability of the guy there, but
Let
still an
me
interesting
Let me just
difference, right?
interject just for a second, if you
Yeah.
don't mind, while we're talking about Legaia getting nerfed. Just Stephen Penn asked a question in the chat, and I'm just wondering if I'm reading it wrong. Stephen had asked, "Do you think you will ever come out with a set that does need new champions?" I'm assuming it's supposed to say does not need new champions, like a set without champions, where the cards and abilities will create enough interest completely on their own. And assuming that that's what he meant, a set that doesn't need new champions, I'd like to know what your thoughts on that would be. Like, my thought might be maybe like a smaller themed subset. You could do like a whole subset revolving around a cool theme, or a crossover with a different IP or something. But um, I don't know what I think about a whole full size set without new champions being introduced. What are your thoughts? Do you feel like that's a key component you always need to have, or have you ever given any thought to a championless product?
I mean, it's sort of tough, right? Because like there's a lot of champions, and then there's a lot of champions in my mind that are unplayable.
Yeah.
As far as like a competitive positioning, we haven't really defined how many champions we really want to see inside of a meta, but at this point, it's all about as a casual game, it's finding champions that people really sort of connect with or really want to play more. Do I think we'll have sets without champions? Like you say, yeah. I mean, anything is possible. We've reduced the number of champions down to 6 to 8 per set versus the 10 to 12 that they were pumping out.
Right.
Um, and that's going to slow down. We have the benefit of bringing back champions and sort of tweaking them a little bit. So until, I mean, thinking of like that sort of idea and bringing and updating champions, that gives us a lot where we won't have something necessarily brand new, but maybe just slightly modified. I think there's definitely with the change so that limited. So if you're doing draft or sealed, you have all the champions at your disposal for draft and sealed, and then that eliminates having the need to have every set have 12 champions, which would allow us to then go in that direction of having no champions. I think it depends on the story too. There's a lot of aspects there. Like if there's something we want to tell, if there's something we want to bring in. Designing champions is a lot of fun for sure. It's definitely a lot of work because they require a lot to balance and to sort of hone in those abilities because they are always in the arena. So I would definitely say the pacing of the champions, especially new champions, will probably go down a lot.
I
And
think
then
so too.
as we update old champions, keep them in, because at this point everything's still in standard. Once we have a rotation, then we'll sort of, reassess. Okay, well now that we have a rotation, these champions are the only ones that are in rotation. These champions are the ones that are available everywhere. What does our champion pool look like, right? I think, if you want to go to like what's healthy for the game, you want to have at least 2 minimum, probably 3 champions inside of the standard set for each color.
For each color pairing, you mean?
Each color pairing. That way you get sort of again, the game is built on a fighter, summoner, mage sort of triangle. So by providing the players that triangle in rotation, either by an updated champion or a brand new champion, doesn't have to be always 3 brand new. Allows them to give them the options where that hopefully that rock paper RPS system is working. So
Couple things. One, Timmy T's joined us in the chat. Hi, Timmy T. Welcome
nice.
back to another live stream. Damien has just asked you a question, Will. Is it easier to make them stronger and nerf them, or to make them weaker and then buff them after?
So usually I make them stronger, and then my testing team makes them weaker. And then we usually we usually fall in between. So it's kind of like we sort of start out strong and be like, hey, well, this is way too strong. Let's tone it way back down. And then when you turn all the knobs down, and then you're like, okay, well, I don't even want to play this anymore. Then you can sort of start adjusting. So to answer the direct question would be probably let's start full blast. Let's see Let's see how crazy it is if a champion just moves around the board whenever they want. And then let's scale that back into like, okay, well maybe it can't move all the time. Maybe it can only move once or twice, or in a certain situation, right? So then you get those adjustments down. But
You often find that your initial version of a champion you've designed, do you think in your head this is probably going to be too overpowered and going to have to be nerfed? Or do you often find that you think you've got it just right, and then it comes in playtesting, oh, this is a little too powerful?
so I tend to think that the initial builds are too powerful, and then sometimes I'm proven wrong. Like sometimes in my head, I'm not always the one that thinks, what happens, what, like this is only situational, or this is only, only good in this one situation, right? Like I'm more, well, sort of here's the person or here's the character in my mind. If I was playing them, this is the kind of, how I want to be able to move around, how I want to be able to interact, how I want to be able to do damage. Then usually the colors sort of blend into that, right? So, I mean, so we could use Oni as an example, right? So Jeff, And a lot of people wanted Oni to come back, and so for me,
Also, a lot of people didn't think Oni would ever appear again. It was too it was a long shot. I think a lot of people were very surprised when Oni came back as well. So, which is cool.
yeah, I mean, the first hurdle was making sure that Oni got a second color.
Yeah. Do
And
do you know
so
why Oni was monocolor? Did you ever hear the story on how Oni got designed as a monocolor to begin with?
so Oni, it was just the original demo deck that was part of like selling the game at conventions. It
Oh,
was just
okay.
easier to have, an all one color deck and just sort of run through the cards, the mechanics wise, without getting too much into the weeds of specifically colors. But
Was there
at least
only
that's what I
one demo
knew.
deck, or was there
Yeah.
because there's only one monocolor champ? So
Yes. There's only the one demo deck, and it was an alpha product. So
fair. I think.
I think you. Oh,
Yeah.
you're reading
Go
it.
ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. We're
I
both
think
saying
you
the same
should
thing.
maybe reprint some old cards for the new players so they can get all the cards. Yeah,
Some
it'll
old
happen.
cards will very likely be appearing in some cool promo packs that'll be coming out as organized play kicks into full steam later on this year. That's one way that some of them will some that we really want to see reprinted, but maybe don't fit into a set necessarily. And then there'll be some
There's
reprints
also,
every set, right?
unfortunately, there's also a lot of old cards that you don't want. Um,
Yeah,
so
some
there's
that
a
are broken, right?
well that and some that are just very limited or very very niche plays, very not played much at all. So, but that's only because they're alpha beta sort of testing that sort of power level. But I mean, there's because alpha beta was low, right? You have Welcome to J, which is all the same cards, and J2, which is all the same cards, but um, it's one of those things where there's so many printings of those cards. Yes, I know new players trying to get the old versions of those. There's definitely like we think about that too a lot. Like we think about what's the cards that we need to reprint, but a lot of the times there will be reprints, will be upgrades, not necessarily direct reprints unless it's specifically working.
Fair. Can you answer Damien's question, or maybe read it? I guess. Will there be promo unique cards not in a set like how One Piece or Digimon are? See, my thing is I don't know what One Piece or Digimon are doing. I haven't played either of those. Uh,
Oh, so he's
promo.
saying, well, like, so Digimon releases promo cards all the time, and they are completely unique. They're functionally unique promos. So
Oh,
the
like
only
not
way to
available in a set.
right, so the only way to get that card with that text line and those stats is by getting that promo, and that's something that we'll never do.
Right. Those other games, do they do that through like promotional packs that you get by playing in events, or are they more like a hard to find card that you have to go to a special event playground to
They're
get it?
yeah, like Digimon. There's some that you have to go to specific events to. Some you have to get like a specific magazine to get that card out of the magazine. Um, there's a lot.
I'm not opposed to alternate arts and things like that that are hard to get through special ways, but I think to look at Magic the Gathering for a second, there's some real problems that happen sometimes when there's a card that's hard to get. Like for example, a few years ago there was a buy a box promo card in blue for Magic the Gathering, maybe 6 or 7 years ago now. I forget what the exact name of the card was, but it basically let you add instant speed for 7 mana. I think it was. You would take an extra turn after the turn ended, and it was a buy box promo. So they only made so many of them, and they only came in foil because back then they were only doing buy box promos in foil. Um, and it wound up being a real problem because one, at competitive events, and this is back when I was a Magic judge all the time at like very major events, there were competitive events where deck lists needed to run that card, but because they were only in foil, people's decks were kind of marked because you could kind of cut to the
Mm.
cards because they were curving. And then other people were complaining that the buy box promo was selling for $150 to $200 on the secondhand market because there was only so many printed. And like, if you want to place that, you either had to pay a fortune to buy them or you had to like buy 4 boxes, which either way is crazy, right? So my experience as a Magic judge at the time and seeing how many different ways things went wrong when there's a card that's very playable and you can only get it through one narrow channel. It was a really good reason for me to be like, I don't want to do that. I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to make it. If there's going to be a powerful card, it's got to come through the normal channels. Alternate arts and whatnot can go through restricted, hard to find sources, but like you just wreck the meta and make a lot of people have feel bads if there are cards that geographically I couldn't get to Cleveland. I guess I don't get to play that card in my top tier deck this year.
Yeah, and that's specifically functionally unique, right? We're not talking about like unique versions of a card. Like I love to have, an alternate art done by a specific artist of a certain champion or a certain specific summon if it was like a key summon for that set or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I really like what Star Wars Unlimited does in their promo packs, right? So they have the regular cards redone in different alternate frames and a few alternate arts, but they also have a special foiling. So you now have these play packs that you get, and there's a special foil that you can only get from playing, right? The text isn't different. You don't have to play with it, but you can go and try to find it and try to collect it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a great model to do for sure.
And then and then like having alternate arts, it's I think alternate arts and having either like a special foiling or a special treatment as a promo or as a welcome to this event is really cool. But the one thing I always disliked about that was when you get the one copy, you never had anything to actually like trade with, right? So the other thing that is really cool is when you get like a little pack of 3 or whatever, or a pack of 4 or whatever number that is, doesn't really matter. But then
Oh yeah.
eventually you can kind of start trading them, right?
Yeah.
And you can collect those that way.
Yeah, that's true. It does kind of suck when you're at a major event and you get that one Grand Prix promo or whatever, and it's a great card, but all your friends want it and you only got one. And it's like, well,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely a nicer feeling of being able to get a couple copies of a card so that you can do what you said, trade them. Janice in the chat is just chiming into that like unique versions of cards is great, but like kind of echoing what I was saying. I think that we don't want the game to become pay to play. Is one of the things, right? That's the risk you would run if there's in a card, and the only version of it at all is hard to find through whatever means. God help you if it winds up being a dominant card that everybody
Mm.
wants, because then we'd fall into the same situation that we're very consciously trying to avoid, which is we want Genesis to be the best and most fun game to play, but we also want it to be one of the most affordable. We're not in the business of pricing our players out. So these are things that we have to think about when we make decisions on alternate arts versus unique cards versus treatments and all the other. So
Which is the fun stuff too, right? So
yeah, there's lots of options and things you can do that will reward players for collectability. And I'm all for having a super rare alternate art version of a card that's super hard to find, and collectors are super proud of having it. Damien in the chat's mentioning Sky Dragon. That's a great example from Genesis of a card that originally was very hard to find because I think it was only at the one event. But then later on, what was the new version of Sky Dragon called?
Zanber Dragon.
Zamber Dragon, right? Basically a functional reprint. So if you really want it in your decks, you can get it, but it's not going to cost you $1 million, and it doesn't make the people who have the original version of Sky Dragon mad that there's decreased in value due to reprints. So it's all about working it around to maintain the collectability and the value of collectible cards for people, while also ensuring that if you want to get a card, maybe especially in Genesis, you might run 7, 8, 10 copies of a card depending on its chi value in a deck. We don't want those cards to be $50 to $100 each. Not for just one basically playable in your deck. So
Hmm. And we also have a few different frames too, right? That we can do different card dressings, and we could have like a retro frame now because we have that option,
yeah,
which is kind of cool as well.
yeah,
Um,
that'll
so
be fun to dabble with in the future for sure.
so Oni was requested to come back and was requested to you know can we bring Oni back to the game? And I was like, sure, like, and then you sort of sit with it for a bit. At least how I approached it was I wanted Oni to be similar to Rain for reasons, and then I wanted Oni to feel, I wanted Oni to have this unique feeling of just being untouchable and having this power to move around. And which I think we kind of achieved. But it was really interesting that kind of what happened was we started really strong, and you could just never sort of hit Oni, and that was making some feel bad situations, right? So in testing, we kind of pulled it back. So now what we have is, yes, Oni has this sort of swift warp, very similar um, to Kato, but warping themselves. And they have this unique sort of, if I can get behind my opponent, I can stop them from playing something. So that's going to take a lot of effort.
Yeah.
I have this energy, so I have the endurance to move around. So I'm going to feel very strong, very agile, very coming in and out. But if I'm spotted, or if someone sees me, or if I'm in an awareness, then I can't sort of disappear and come back. But if I'm able to get out of that awareness and then move around, so very much like an agile dancing around, kind of getting in, very assassin like. And I'm really excited to see what people do. Um, Different stat line in these colors, so that gives people an opportunity to try something. A little bit less health and a little bit less aura, but you have this high energy. You have this ability to play all those movement cards. Um, it's just, what do you do if they're starting to swarm? Like if they're starting to put a bunch of summons down and you're sort of trapped in their awareness, you need to have some answers to take out the summons so you can then do your swift warp, or you have to have movement tech, and then you won't have any answers to sort of deal with the summons. So it's a very interesting tension, but you can play Oni a couple different ways. And at the end of testing, it was one of those ones where it's like, it's going to be interesting to see. It might be one of those champions that pushes some older cards to, maybe they might need restrictions or whatever. I don't like. It's hard to say where the player base will land, because as much as our testers and JC and I as designers can go and push a card to its limits, there's other people who will see other connections, and we just know that's a natural thing, right? We get it to the point where we're happy to sort of present it to people and to give them. And I think Oni is a very agile, very in and out. Can't take a lot of hits, or has to be careful watching getting swarmed around by summons. But using the right sort of abilities can be very interesting play style.
Absolutely.
Compared to the old Oni, which was probably the most vanilla of vanilla champions, right? 20, like, you've lost a color, you have no energy reduction, you're only at 20 health, which we already know is, you have to be doing something pretty strong to be less than 20 health, and then you only have a basic attack too. But the lore and the sort of the folklore behind Oni, and where Oni is and where Oni wasn't, and why is it only here and not there, was kind of cool. So um, kind of ties into that whole sort of assassin theme. So
Yeah, which is really cool. I like that a lot. Uh, is that all that you want to cover about Oni? Would you like to move on to
uh,
something else, or do you still have more thoughts that you want to share?
no, I think it's good for Oni, unless there's any questions on Oni, which I don't think there are.
Fair enough. Who would you like next? Anybody but Alta, because I haven't had a chance to dig up Alta yet.
Oh. Well, I guess whoever's next in your lineup there.
Okay, give me 1 second here. I does green blue sound okay to you? We'll mix
Yeah,
those.
I think that's next, right? Green blue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna throw up on the screen here Proteus and Gamilla, two
Mm-hmm.
green blue champions, both from a very fun set. Loving the look of the cards. What
Yeah. So,
what one were you most excited about when the set came out? Proteus or Gamilla? Because they both feel extremely powerful to me.
so Proteus was definitely my champion. If I was going to be playing in a tournament, Proteus is probably the one I was going to be working on the most. just because of that flexibility. And that ability to sort of at the beginning of the round, yes, I lose one life, but as we know, there are a number of cards that you can gain a pretty good benefit from um, when you lose one life each round. So some of the breaks and some other things. um, Proteus is. It's interesting that Proteus has no energy reduction, being built like a fighter. Um,
Well,
25 health, 95 aura.
yeah, that 95 aura is a bit of a misnomer though, because like a lot of people are gaining 10 aura every single turn.
Right, which that factors in too, right? But the no energy reduction definitely hurts Proteus as far as some of the abilities, but um, green and blue are notorious for not always having the best energy techniques.
Yeah,
We're working on that. There are some good ones. Warp Strike being probably the best technique or energy card in those colors. Um, but yeah, so I really like Proteus. Proteus was a lot of fun in testing. Um, you can build Proteus pretty much with that 25 health. You can build Proteus pretty much just by himself, or you can do the summons thing too, and work it that way. And then Gamilla, I mean, Gamilla is an issue for sure. Gamilla is kind of has the Kareen effect, right? Gamilla is one of those cards where you have to go through. It's basically a testing barrier. Does this card get broken in Gamilla? Does Gamilla break this card?
yeah.
One of those situations. And
I imagine you
unfortunately,
had to look long and hard at a lot of stuff, right? Because
yeah,
Camilla, in a lot of ways, was a bit of a game changer. Like just totally different from any other champion.
very different. Kind of very game breaking. Like the next, I guess the earliest version of game breaking this effect would have been Kun, with that dash and flight, being able to fly over anything and be not impeded by movement was kind of the first instance of really breaking. And then obviously, Nubia's 2 card draw each round is also a brutal ability. So definitely in that power level of very strong. The things you can do. Um, yeah, I mean, I won't spend too much time on Gamilla just because there's um, it's very strong, very powerful. There's a lot of builds. You can build this so many different ways. But it is definitely on, it's on a watch list as far as like how do we control this, because we don't want to limit our design space just because of this one champion.
Right.
So it's definitely something that we have to make ourselves aware of, and what things we can do. So um, definitely definitely fun. Like if you get that right build, like a parry build or the caustic millipede build,
Yeah.
those things can get out of hand very, very fast. So
I could not wait to do a parry build with Gamilla when the set came out, as many people felt as well. There was a lot of parries flying around in our area up north at the time.
I bet, yeah, for sure.
So hindsight later on, do you feel like it turned out it wasn't as broken as people thought, right? Because Camilla, to my knowledge, isn't really hyper competitive right now, at least not in our meta up north. Have you seen any dominant Camilla decks, or did it turn out to not be the big scary thing that everybody thought it was going to be?
um, it's it's up there. Like I would say, it's definitely up there. Once people factor in just how much you can do, like the ability to play your own ability through a summon, right? So even if your Gamilla's nowhere near the battlefield, it can still get that 1 extra damage in action speed every time. Um, the Pretty Bird combo can be really insane. The fact that you can warp strike Pretty Birds and then have it do a bunch of damage by pulling something off, or the Caustic Millipede is still the one that goes back because it can give champions um, decay
Decay.
and it hits for
Yeah.
4, and that can be really hard to come back from. And
Yeah.
so And then you factor in healing spells, right? Healing spells onto your summons when people aren't expecting them, and it can get kind of crazy. Now the 21 health I think does keep it in check as far as competitive goes, because you have those decks that are coming in and hitting really hard.
Yep.
And there's probably a few other cards in invasions that kind of, may force people to play as, maybe play more chaos, right? So they're going to find some chaos champion that they want to play. Or, maybe it's a healthy inspiration, so they want to play Bellum. So there are some cards that definitely will lead you out of Gamilla's colors, but I would say in this color pool or in this color pie, or color whatever it's called, combination, Gamilla's probably the scariest version, and Proteus is pretty close to that in my mind. Maybe I'm just biased towards Proteus.
But you don't play Gamilla as much as Proteus, am I right? Or
Yeah, I would play Proteus more, but I'm also
is that
I
because you're
don't play
so
a
good you want to give people an advantage?
no. I just don't play. I don't like. I've always played like Proteus was the first champion in blue that I actually wanted to play. So it'd be the first Axon champion that I would actually choose to play, because I was notorious for knowing as being the person who would never play Axon in anything competitive, just because I just
And
didn't
then
do it other
Proteus
than
got
one time.
and Proteus got revealed and you had an epiphany and realized I've been missing out on blue. Is that what happened?
Almost, almost.
You almost had an epiphany. Okay.
Um,
For those watching at home that don't know, Will hates the card Epiphany, so that's a little
I
inside
do. I
baseball there
really
for you.
do. We have two left,
Yeah, but before we move on, I got to ask, how would you make Epiphany better? Like, how would you make it so that you don't hate Epiphany?
and it has to exist.
Yeah, well, a version of it. Obviously, I'm saying you can change it.
So to fix Epiphany, you just have to add Exert.
Oh, okay.
So you
Yep.
draw 3 cards and exert yourself. Still allows you to do whatever you want at Swift, but it stops you from chaining in Epiphanies, and also doesn't stop you from playing another Epiphany the next round, but it does slow down the combo aspect of it. So,
Damien
um,
was suggesting we should just make Baffled a legal card for you.
um, yeah, the reducing down to 4 works, except for when someone plays an Epiphany and then gets the second Epiphany, even though they only have 4 copies in the deck. Then it just feels worse, and it's like, well, that was just a toying cost, and now now I'm sitting like 12 cards in their hand, and it's just they're gonna have so many options. So
Yeah, because
with
even
all
if
the resources up front,
yeah,
like if
even
it
if you
wasn't all
limit it to
resources up
four,
front,
it's too much.
yeah, limit it at 4. Even I would like, even if you put the exert cost on it, I would still limit it to 4, because of that. It's just that game warping, and it's that feel bad for the person. It feels bad for the person who's getting it played against, and it really hurts deck building for people who are playing it, because you can do a lot more and not need to have those draw 3 cards.
What if it would have got errata to say that you can only cast Epiphany once per turn? Would that have also solved the problem for you? Or do you really like the exert part so they can't cast creatures after?
They're kind of the same. But yes, the exert is more damning, as far as like you have to really decide when you're going to do that, right? So you can't Epiphany and then keep playing out a whole bunch of summons, right? Because that also was, something that would happen is you'd go, 3 Epiphanies in, and then you're dropping 5 Baruchs down, and then, that's
Yeah.
20 damage on the board. So,
Yeah. All right. I've got Alta available now. I found her while we were chatting. And then so we could do Alta or we could do Caleb Redvorn. I have both sides I can put up at the same time. What would you prefer? Or do you want all
oh,
3?
we go back to Alta real quick, just as a.
All right, let me just bring up Alta here. Alta's up on the screen now.
So Alta was one of our first times where we got to interact with 2 spaces at once. So kind of like giving you a chance to like deal with little summons. The unfortunate part with Alta is that Origins really wasn't putting out a lot of little summons. Like the only little summon that really sort of saw a lot of play was Pain Imp, but because Pain Imp was paid with the cost was paid for health, it really it kind of just felt like you did the one damage to the champion and they just didn't have a card, so it didn't really feel like you were kind of getting some board control back. But I like Alta as far as the design. Like as far as the champion's design is really really cool. As far as the storyline, the being able-bodied, right? So
Yeah.
um, and having that lightning ability is really cool.
Mhm.
Having the 4/4 awareness is probably my favorite awareness as far as like on a champion. It doesn't feel too broken. It feels like you have ability to move around and do things. The 23 health and the 140 is a great stat line too, right? So you look at Nubia was 20 health and 150, and then Alta you gain 2 more health, you lose 10 ore, which feels like a very good trade. It's just that Nubia is drawing cards and you have all your resources, so more cards means and having more resources means more cards and having access to all of the cards in your deck easier and faster just was more powerful. So unfortunately, Alta is still, and it also kind of was tough too, right? I think as we get more Phage cards, maybe Alta sees a bit more of a resurgence. But with the Origins card pool, it seemed like if I was going to play Alta and I'm in blue, it was really easy to shift over to Nubia.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I think also got a lot better once Invasion came out though, because there was basically double the phage cards available in the pool.
yeah,
I thought phage really got flushed out a bit once Invasion came out. It's tough for any game if you're adding another color. That first set, like unless you make that set really lean into the new color more than everything else, like it's tough. It takes time to get that depth of card pool.
yeah, for sure.
Moving on now to our flip champion, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here. Let me take off Alta and oh, I put them both in the same spot. I got to drag one out of the way.
So clearly, um, I mean, from a lore perspective, leaning into that, Jackal Hyde kind of idea, but this demon possession and having a link between demons and non-demons through the same sort of, the same entity, same person. Um, there's a lot here. Like, so when I was tasked with having, in our meeting when we were tasked with like, well, let's do champions that transform. I kind of, I went to okay, well, if we're going to do transformation champions, there should be one that you control, right? So a champion you control when it's transforming. There's one that you transform only once, you can't transform back, and there's one that you are out of control. You can't really control, but you can kind of control because of deck building.
Yeah.
So that was sort of where my brain went as far as the design space, and so that's how we got Sven is the one you can control. We have Isaac with the one that you can transform only once, and then Caleb. And then Caleb was one of those champions where I sort of had designed. I had this, idea of like the whole who the champion was, what the art was. Like the art was very clear in my head as far as what I wanted, and Constance nailed the artwork. That's exactly
Art
what I
agreed.
had in my
Yeah,
head.
for sure. It's wonderful art.
Mm-hmm. But this was one where the champion came out and just wasn't playable. Just was, it was too weak. There was no, it was too
During
random.
play testing, like your initial version,
During,
you're saying?
yeah, yeah. So that was sort of the situation. The initial version was just wasn't there. So this is where sort of the testing team really sort of pushed, based off the idea, based off the premise that we want. We wanted to work on, a few different key aspects, right? So
Yeah.
Caleb was a scholar, right, which means gaining information, having more thoughts in his mind. So that naturally went into the breakthrough ability.
Mhm.
And then Readborn was all about consuming a person's thoughts and taking from a person's thoughts, and that led to the Neurum and to the discarding ability. Now, we wanted. Caleb was flipping a lot, and you kind of always felt like, oh, I didn't want to flip just yet. I kind of want to flip now, or I want to flip, but I can't. So we had to sort of tweak that a little bit too. And I think where we landed was, um, if you build your deck, you can flip as much as you want, if as long as you have the enough 6 cheese in the deck, and then you can choose when you go back, right? So sort of like once Readborn sort of takes over and it becomes the dominant persona, he has a lot more control. He is more powerful than Caleb, and so they can't, he won't want to go back into the mirror as easily, right? So
Right.
it's kind of building into that theme of um, you can try to hold Readborn back, or you can kind of lean into it, right? Depending on how you want to play.
A comment in the chat from Stephen Cullop saying that Sarah and Harlequin are who they're interested in the most. I just got a quick say, and Will knows this already. Sarah is my absolute favorite champion. So if you haven't had a chance to play with a copy of Sarah yet, I think you'll love it when you get her put into a deck. Very fun. My favorite champion. Love it. So
I
can't
guess I
wait for
guess
the next version.
maybe that's our color combination for next week then.
Oh yeah, definitely. Let's focus on that color combination. That'll be fun. We'll
All
talk.
right, we can do Chaos Phage, and then
Yeah,
I guess we can do Thymos Phage too while we're at it. So there we
that
go.
sounds good. I should take a second just to read out the list of names that I've got on the wheel, just to make sure I haven't missed anyone. So on my list, I've got Damien, Jeremy H, Stephen Penn, Stephen Cullop, Cardboard Cohorts, Scott Simon O, Ryan, Alana, and Timmy T. I hope I haven't missed anybody. I'm just going to double check, scroll up in the chat, make sure I didn't miss anyone.
Good list of people.
Yep. Yeah, I love to see a couple new names that we haven't had join in the chat recently. That's awesome. So, and for any of the new people watching tonight who might have not seen or heard about the news lately, just to let you know, if you have a local game store near you and you want to talk them into giving Genesis a chance, you can always have your local game store reach out to us at hello@edgeofexile.com, which I'll throw up on the screen here. Hello@edgeofexile.com. If anybody, staff or an owner from a game store reaches out to us and says, hey, I'm interested in trying your game out in my store, we'll send you a bunch of free product to your local game store. We'll send some promotional packs to give away. We'll send some paper play mats so that people can just pick up a deck and have a free paper play mat to play with at home, stuff like that. Lots of stuff. So we try very hard to be very supportive of the local game stores and work with them a lot to help them build their Genesis communities nice and quick and easy. So if this sounds like it's your jam, your local game stores really have nothing to lose by reaching out to us and getting a bunch of free promotional stuff. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and also then they get a chance to see if they can get metamorphosis or invasions in, right? I know a lot of stores that will order boxes for patrons that go to the store, and
Yep.
it helps us too, right?
Yeah, and another thing too is if a store, a lot of stores have had success just by leaving a Genesis playmat out on a table that's not being used, because people will walk in and inevitably be like, "What is that for?" And then
Mm.
it's a great icebreaker, gets people talking about it, and you can kind of give them the 30-second rundown of Genesis. It's kind of like a collectible card game crossed with
Mhm.
chess and a little bit of Warhammer. So it appeals to all sorts of audiences and players. So yeah, it's a fun game to play, fun game to watch, fun game to talk about. So Steven's still mowing and listening. Hopefully, Cardboard Cohorts is getting those gains at the gym. Whoa, pump it up. And yeah, so I went through the list of all the people. I haven't seen anybody else add a comment, so I think it might be time for us to start
Let's
winding
spin the
down
wheel.
by giving away a prize and spinning that wheel. Let
All
me
right.
find the. Oh, it's going to take me just a second here because I I have the wheel ready. But you know what I didn't do? I didn't add your camera. Oh, it's a black screen, Will. I have failed you, and I'm so sorry.
I can be a voice from the darkness.
A voice from the darkness. All right. I appreciate your patience with me today. I'm going to do what Jeff always did. I'm going to shuffle up the names a few times, make sure it's super, super random. And then once I click the spin to win, somebody is going to win a booster pack of Invasion, currently the most recent set available in stores. And don't worry, if you're in the States, Canada, wherever you may be, we will ship it to you free of charge. You don't even have to pay for the shipping. So here we go. It's time for me to click this spin to win. Let's see who's going to win a booster pack tonight.
Oh, and Steven said he just texted his owner. That's awesome.
Scott, congratulations. First time viewer from what I remember. Welcome. You are the prize winner tonight. All you need to do to get your prize is you just have to send us an email, and I'm going to switch back to the other screen so I can put the email back up on the screen here. Let me put that email up. It's hello@edgeofexile.com. So, Scott, just send us an email. Let us know where you want us to mail it to, and we will mail it to you free of charge. And you're going to get a pack of the latest set. As Will, as you were saying, that's awesome that Stephen just texted the owner of the local store to email us. That's great. We'll take good care of your store and make sure we send a bunch of free promotional product and get you guys everything that you need to get started having some fun. So that's awesome. All right.
Nice.
Well, I think this has been a really fun stream tonight. I love it when we get to hear your thoughts on what the playtesting and the designing was. I'm looking forward to next week's already because now I know we're going to be talking about my favorite champion,
Your
which
favorite?
I'm pretty stoked about that. I'm excited. That's going to be a real fun episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. Before we go, I just want to mention for all the people in Ontario, once again, Muskoka Cards and Collectibles is going to be opening in just about a week. It might even be less than a week. It might be this Saturday that they're opening up in Bracebridge. Exciting new store. I've seen some photos, some preview photos of what the store is shaping up to look like inside. It's going to look real great. And they are starting with Genesis product right off the bat. 2 weeks after they open, no, 3 or 4 weeks after they open, Janice and I and the team were going up to do a bunch of demos for them. We're going to do a Genesis gameplay day and get started. It's going to be really fun. I'm excited, and hopefully, we'll have some more stores joining our store locator map very soon as well. So, always lots of fun as we're growing and expanding. And definitely, thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. It was a lot of fun. Anything you want to say before we go, Will?
No, I'm hopefully there's something gained from all of our talk on champions. I know it's something that I'm definitely interested in. I like the champion aspect. I like where the champions are going. Where trying to get in ahead of what's happening inside of like unique spaces, and how do we make deck designing more interesting, or how do we push people to play certain ways if they want to. Obviously you're not forced to play a certain way, but you can always build your deck whichever way you want. But sometimes a champion really leads herself into a cool deck design, and that's always something interesting. So, and Steven just mentioned there at the end, Joey taught me to play the game,
Yep.
which is really
Out in
cool.
Colorado. Yep. And he's
And
asking about
pushing.
stores in Alberta, right? So,
Mhm.
uh, definitely, Stephen, if you can, just shoot your friend a text and let them know to do the same thing. Get their local game store to reach out to us, and we'll happily send a bunch of promotional stuff for free to get them started. On top of that, that actually reminded me of something else I want to mention. A little thing before we go is a couple things in the media that's cool. One, Dan over at brutalgamer.com got a bunch of images from me today because he's got a couple articles about Genesis that are going to be going live.
Oh, fun.
I think the first one's going to be going live later this week from the sound of it over at brutalgamer.com. Other cool thing is we got an email at our hello at Edge of Exile email from a journalist, not like a content creator, but an actual like newspaper journalist. In fact, he's actually the editor at a newspaper out in Saskatchewan. And rush shipped him a bunch of promotional products on Friday, and they actually got it at the newspaper out in Saskatchewan today from the tracking. I saw that. So it's one of those small town
Cool.
newspapers where it's connected with a bunch of other small towns all over Saskatchewan, like multiple newspapers. So I think we're going to be getting some good publicity in the next few weeks out in Saskatchewan too. So that'll be cool. Hopefully we see some growth and hook up with a few new stores in Saskatchewan. We'll try and hook up with stores in Alberta as well and continue filling in those middle gaps across Canada and the provinces that we aren't already in yet. So exciting things, lots of new content, and the media is starting to notice all the cool things we're doing. So
Mhm.
lots of fun.
And we were in Alberta and we were in BC before, and it's just one of those you have to work our way back out that way again. So
Yep. Well, we do still have a store in BC up in Prince George. We've got
oh right.
yeah, we still have the one store in BC, but I'm all for adding more stores and more communities, and especially as we work to sometime in the next year or so, we're going to be wanting to ramp up organized play and getting like nationals and world championships and stuff. So we
Mhm.
want to definitely fill in the gaps so that hopefully everywhere there's a store within a reasonable drive for people to go play Genesis. So
Yeah,
that's
that'll
my
be
little bit of
awesome.
news. So awesome. Well, thanks, Will, for coming in and sharing your
Thank
thoughts.
you.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. It was a great, lively chat. We had a lot of viewers. It's been a lot of fun. We'll be doing it all again next Monday night, once again at 7 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, if there's anything we can do to help you have lots of fun, just reach out and let us know, and we will take care of you. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you here again next week. Bye for
Bye,
now.
everyone.
The king is dead, killed from a poisonous cup. Another prophet sings, and the crowd erupts. Hail the new king, and so